It's podcast o'clock. How y'all doing? Welcome to yet another podcast. My name is Oma, your very sweet on radio. Of course, this is Oma Diary 360, where I get to share my story as a journalist, just the same way as that I witnessed them. But the difference here is I'm more like at home, okay? All right, so we've been on this journey. This particular episode of this podcast, we've been talking about the general elections in Nigeria. That's the presidential election, which already held on the 25th day of February 2023. Meanwhile, did you vote? I hope you voted. I mean, as a Nigerian, okay. I mean, I know a lot of people from different countries who are listening. I'm talking about if you're a Nigerian. Did you vote? Hope you went out to cast the vote on that particular day. So this podcast are basically I'm not going to exhaust everything so it doesn't take so long, but I'm just going to look at what I witnessed as a journalist, because I was on the field, and that particular day it was quite memorable because usually ever since I got into journalism, since 2012 that I became a journalist, I've been covering elections. I've always loved to cover elections. Why, you may ask? I love to go out and see people cast their votes. I love to go out and see people exercise their franchise. So it helps me to tell the story differently, from a different perspective. So this particular election, that is 25th of February, the presidential election, it was really different because there were a lot of tension. Oh my goodness, if you're a Nigerian, you are in the Nigerian social space on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all over the places, you will notice the tension. All right. And the tension is not unconnected with the fact that there were different candidates from different parties. Of course, we had Bola Ahmed Tinubu from APC, which is the ruling party. Then we had Peter Obi from Labour Party. And also we have Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, who is from PDP. And it was really a tug of war. There were other candidates, of course. You have Rabiu Kwankwaso from NNPP and some other candidates from other parties. But these are the frontliners. So it was a tension-soaked atmosphere, environment. I woke up quite early that particular day. And of course, one of the things that I've learned as a journalist in the training I've had going for election coverage is don't go alone. If anything is going to happen to you, there will be people to help you out. So that day, I had to call on some of my colleagues from other radio stations so I can tag along with them. And we were to stay around Onitsha North local government area. That was exactly where I went to cover. But one thing, interestingly, is the fact that, of course, if you've been on the news, you'll find out that the Southeast, there's been a lot of agitation here and there, agitation from different groups, agitating for different things. So there will always be these people ordering the other people to sit at home, For example, in Southeast on Mondays, people don't go out on Mondays because it's not necessarily because of the sit-at-home order. I remember in the past years when the sit-at-home started, some people will go out, but a lot of persons lost their lives. Some businesses, they had criminals come there and steal and kill people. So people don't want to lose their lives. And just basic, nobody wants to lose his or her life. So people accept to stay at home. Not necessarily because of the sit-at-home, but because of the fear of being killed. Nobody wants to die. That's the truth. So for this election, there were sit-at-home orders here and there, emanating from different quarters. And there are also splinter groups in all these quarters. So people were like, is there going to be mayhem? Is there going to be problem? Is there going to be challenges? And even me as a journalist, I will tell you, that particular day, my mom called me in the morning and she came up, mothers, she came up with this particular dream that she had. I was like, really? She said, well, that why she's calling me is that she wants me to be careful as I'm going out there, because she definitely knows her daughter. She knows that there is no way I will not go out there for election, to cover election. So she said I should be careful as I go out. I said, okay, of course. One thing I've promised myself is that I will always tell my story. Okay. And as a responsible journalist, one of the things we are taught is to live to tell the story. Don't be the story. Tell the story, but don't be the story. So that was my mindset that particular 25th day of February when I went out to cover the elections. So I started with Federal Housing Estate. I visited the polling units in INEC. When I got there, there was no INEC official past 8 a.m. Meanwhile, on the election order, the procedure that INEC released, they said that election will start by 8:30 a.m. All right. And they already said that the INEC officials will print the names of the electorate so that once you come to that polling unit, you will see your name and it will be easier for you to be accredited for you to cast your vote. But those things never happened. All the polling units that I visited polling units within Federal Housing Estate in Onitsha North Local Government Area. I also visited polling units within Trans Nkese, also in Onitsha North Local Government Area. I did not see any paper containing names of electorates. That is number one failure from the part of INEC. Number two, the INEC officials did not come out early. As at 8:30 a.m., 9:30 a.m., 10:30 a.m., the INEC officials, none of the polling units had INEC officials or the materials. Meanwhile, the election was supposed to start at 8:30 a.m. Now, we had to call the Onitsha North Local Government Area to find out what the challenge was. And we now found out that they've not started dispatching the materials, that they were waiting to dispatch the materials. But in thinking about it, in analyzing it, probably it will not be unconnected with the fact that they wanted to make sure that the environment is peaceful and calm before they now dispatch their workers, their staff members, so that nobody will be killed. I mean, nobody will want no organization will even want to lose anyone in the face of, in the line of duty. Okay, so we now decided, I and the colleague I was moving with, we now decided to go to the Onitsha North Local Government Area to find out what exactly was happening. When we got there, in fact, on our way, we now started seeing buses conveying INEC officials. Another thing I found out was that some of these buses, they don't even know the particular polling unit. Meanwhile, in the procedure that INEC brought out, the INEC officials were supposed to go to those places to find out the polling units where they are stationed prior to the day of election. That did not happen. So I and my colleague, we had to stop on the road. We started helping the INEC officials to locate their polling units. We started directing them to their polling units. So by the time some of these INEC officials got to the polling unit, it was already 10:30 to 11, 11:30, 12, some as late as past 1 p.m. So your guess is as good as mine when the election, like the actual voting started. But one thing, okay, before I get to the point, the part of electorate, let me keep telling you about what I found out about some of the INEC officials. So immediately they got to the place, they addressed the crowd of electorate that were waiting for them. And let me tell you that a lot of persons came out as early as 7, as early as 8, and they were so calm and patient waiting for INEC officials to arrive the polling units. In fact, a particular place where I visited in 33, around past 11 a.m., they've not seen INEC officials. But I know these are the ones that received INEC officials and the polling at the polling units by past 12 and past 1 p.m. because we got reports that there were people that had INEC officials arriving that late. And of course, there are places where INEC officials did not go to. Yeah, there are places where they waited from morning till night. They did not see any INEC official. And there were crowds of people there waiting to exercise their franchise. Somewhere in Onitsha, around Awada Primary School, that's a polling unit there. Okay, so about the electorate, I found out something about the electorate. Some of them that came so early, they had to be patient. They wanted to exercise their franchise. Nobody wants to be disenfranchised. They were all calm. They gave themselves numbers, waiting for the INEC officials. Now, when the INEC official came in, they conducted themselves responsibly. They stood in the line. And of course, the INEC officials started doing their accreditation, and they were given the ballot papers to go and cast their votes. And a particular place that I monitored in Transekese, while they were casting the vote, the ballot paper for the presidential candidates finished. And there were still about 10 persons or like 15 persons that were still yet to cast their vote. Do you know that these electorates, they got so mad, they got so angry, that they started telling, because that's from the statistics available, that particular polling unit has 392 registered voters. And I realized that each ballot booklet for the presidential election has 100 leaflets. That's what I realized, because the core member who was posted there said they gave him 3 booklets, and from that 3 booklets, it got finished. Okay, so people were so angry. They even volunteered their vehicles to carry the core member back to the local government area so that he will pick the remaining ballot booklet for presidential candidates. He brought it, and people were able to vote and exercise their franchise. At the end of it all, presiding officer counted the ballot papers, and that particular polling unit, a particular party won, a particular candidate won in that particular polling unit. All right. So, and it was done openly. All right. And by the time I got back, it was to 7 p.m. I got back into Federal Housing Estate, and I found out that there were so many polling units that they were there and they were still casting their votes. I started getting reports of a lot of places where they had to stay till midnight for people to cast their votes. And after casting their votes, they had to count these votes. After counting these votes, they had to make sure that the number is recorded. And after doing all these things, we came out, Nigerians woke up on Sunday expecting to start seeing results trickling in, all of a sudden. INEC now told us that the result will not be transmitted electronically. That's the presidential candidates. The presidential results will not be transmitted electronically, that it will be done manually. And Nigerians were thrown into confusion, the very big confusion orchestrated by INEC. Because in the Electoral Act that was passed in 2022, it was noted that INEC will transmit the result electronically. It was later that we now started hearing that there were glitches with the presidential portal. But the other portal for House of Reps members, Senate, transmitted, the results were transmitted. But for that particular presidential portal, it was not transmitted. There were glitches. And that particular decision, although we are yet to really understand what caused the glitches, because all the parties, before I don't want to preempt that particular decision, as that 1st of March, INEC chairman Professor Mahmood Yakubu announced Bola Ahmed Tinubu of APC as the winner of the presidential election. And as would have been thought, that everybody will be rejoicing, there will be victory on different sides. It was as if a lot of people were mourning from what I noticed. Even I went on social media space, people were angry, shouting, cursing, saying a lot of things. But they said something, which is that if you're not happy with the result, you should go to court. And amazingly, the parties that are not happy, which of course, Labour Party candidates, Peter Obi, PDP candidates, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, of course, they addressed World Press Conference. When Peter Obi addressed World Press Conference, he said, and I quote, "We won this election and we will prove it." Journalists were asking him questions and he said, "I will not answer questions on my way to court." He said, "They said we should go to court. We will go to court. In fact, I want to go to court." So, and they're already in court. All right. And we are following up on this to know exactly how it's going to pan out. As our press time of this recording this podcast, we were supposed to, today is 11th of March, we were supposed to have the gubernatorial election today. All right. But because of the appeal court, because of the courts, because of the ruling of the Supreme Court, which gives the Labour Party candidates authorization to inspect electoral materials, that's the BVAS. Although INEC said they want to reconfigure the BVAS for the March 11 gubernatorial election. But they've been going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. INEC said it will need 5 days in order to reconfigure the BVAS. It's been a lot of analysis, a lot of talks coming from different quarters, and we are really waiting to know how it's going to pan out. So as at the time of recording this podcast, we are waiting on the Labour Party. We're also waiting on INEC to know what is going to happen. Remember, this episode is a special episode to chronicle the journey of Nigerians to choosing their leaders. Labour Party rejected the president-elect. PDP rejected the president-elect. NNPP rejected the president-elect. Most of the parties, they rejected the outcome of the election, especially on the fact that INEC failed its own rules, that INEC went back on its own words, because INEC said there was going to be an electronic transmission of the presidential result, but INEC ended up not transmitting the presidential result. It did it manually. And even at the collation center, I actually watched the manual collation of the result on TV, on live TV. There were particular states that you find out that the figures that INEC was beaming on the TV was different from what the collation officer was calling out. At a point at the collation center, some parties staged a walkout. PDP, LP, ADC, they all staged a walkout because they said they are rejecting that particular result because INEC failed on its own laws, rules, and regulations. And the question is Nigeria a country where people fail to obey court orders, where people disobey rules and regulations of the country with impunity? Is Nigeria that nation? Is Nigeria a lawless society? Is Nigeria a lawless nation? I'd like to hear from you. What do you think about all's been transpiring? Remember, I said that this is a special edition to chronicle the general elections of Nigeria 2023, the all-important year in the life of Nigerians. Let's keep the conversation alive. Let's get talking. Let me know exactly what you think about all that I have talked about today. I look forward to seeing you in my next podcast. I love you. Mwah! Bye-bye.